Well, hey folks, my name is Brad. If you happen to be new to my videos, I explore the mountains of Vermont searching for treasure with my metal detector. But today, I'm not exactly way up in the mountains, and I'm standing next to a major highway. It's major as they get in Vermont. But I am in a side field next to an old building built around 1850, which means hopefully there's about 150 years of treasures hiding in the ground over here. Now, if this is one of the first of my videos that you've seen, I publish one of these every single Friday. So if you like what you see here today, consider hitting that subscribe button. Just come on back next week. I'm gonna get the metal detector turned on and see if we can find a few of these treasures. 90, it's a good sounding target. 91. It's on the bottom of the plug. I see it. Looks silver. It appears what we have here is a little silver dime, I think, just barely sticking out of the plug. Love it when that happens. And, you know, judging by where we are, we have an old 1800s farmhouse over here over my right shoulder, but we have some buildings over here on my left shoulder that are from 1950s, so it could honestly be from any time before 1965. Let's take a look at it here. I actually think that's the date. Let's pop it out of the plug here. Looks like 1941. So yeah, that makes sense. A lot of the things I've been finding in this area, 1930s to 1950s, but maybe the closer we get to the old farmhouse, the older things we'll get. Anytime you can find silver, it is an amazing day, especially for me. In fact, I was actually just going through all of the silver coins I have ever found metal detecting just the other day. Probably way fewer than you would expect. But one thing I found a little bit interesting was I have found more Spanish half reals than I have silver dimes, US dimes. This one here though will go in the case and fill it out a little bit more. Beautiful coin too. Looks like it wasn't in the pocket too long before they dropped it. Awesome. Let's see what else we can find here. Extremely loud. 89. Let's see. No way. It was so shallow. It was like in the grass roots. Well, one of the things that I absolutely love about metal detecting places like this, where the building was built middle of the 1800s, but people have always lived here, so we could find things dropped yesterday, is every time you get a target, every time you dig a hole, you just absolutely never know what it could be or when it could be from. And when I heard this target, it was so loud, it sounded shallow, I thought maybe it was going to be like a beer can or something made out of aluminum. But what it ended up being is this very recognizable piece of solid brass. It looks like it could be modern, but it isn't. This is actually what we call a Reins guide that came off of an old style wagon. Now, we are, in rural Vermont, so people could be driving these wagons around 100 years ago. But I am going to say this is more than likely from the 1800s. This would have attached to the wagon. Reins for the horses would have gone through here to keep them neat. What a cool, surprising find, and so shallow. Why? I am next to a tree right here. Maybe the roots brought them up, maybe frost heaves, who knows? That's a very cool find. Very surprising. Now, this is a complex target. There's a lot going on here. I don't know if it's multiple things. 85 usually, sometimes it bumps up into the 90s. Maybe multiple coins? I shouldn't call it. I just jinxed myself. Oh, it's whatever this is. That's a mystery. Now, I have said this many, many times in previous videos, but when I'm metal detecting places from the 1700s where people really haven't been or spent any time since the 1700s, there isn't really a wide variety of things I find. Usually buttons, buckles, and coins. In the 1800s, It's a wider variety of things, but I can usually identify most of the things I find. But once we start getting into the 1900s, people had so many different things in the house. A lot of the times I don't know what the heck these things are. So what we have here is a mystery find, but I thought it was worth showing the camera because it looks so familiar, but I can't place it. So we have a very thin piece of brass, which sounded so good on the metal detector. But we also have this, it almost looks like a square nail, but I don't think it is. Piece of iron going through the center. And then on this end, I don't know, another piece of non-ferrous metal with a hole in it sideways. I feel like it's part of a lamp or a lampshade. Let me know what you think. Mystery find of the day. The iron, by how rusted it is, it makes me think that it's on the older side, maybe 100 years old, but maybe one of you out there recognizes this very peculiar looking treasure. It's very decorative, more than likely on the inside of the house, I would guess, but no idea what it is. Let's see what else we can find. '92, '93, sounds great. What world is that? Well, I thought I had a modern quarter here, but as I started brushing it off, I did not recognize the president. And it is very light, feather light, clearly made out of aluminum. I did give it a bit of a brush, and we can see down there at the bottom, it says Roosevelt. This side, I think, will reveal what this thing actually is. Shell's Mr. President coin game. This side we can see 32nd President, 1933, 1945, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, when I have found these aluminum tokens in the past, they've actually been associated with Cracker Jack, but this one is from Shell Oil. I just did a quick Google search on my phone because I don't personally remember this. Around 1968, there was a competition or a contest put on by Shell Oil. It's an advertising piece for Shell Oil, of course, but hey, maybe you folks watching this may remember when these were floating around as a game. Let me know if you do. We got Roosevelt. I wonder what we win. Pretty cool find. Not a silver quarter, which I thought it may have been when I first found it. That's okay. Cool piece of advertising history for Shell Oil. Let's see what else we can find. 91. Ooh, I see it. Nice. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but while I was digging that hole, it was very, very like sandy gravel. Truth be told, this is a very large yard, but in different areas, the ground is very different. Some of it is a bunch of really rich, dark topsoil, and some areas are like this. I'm wondering, because of whatever was going on here over the period of time, there were buildings in some places, there were burn pits in some places, who knows. But what we have right here in the gravel is a padlock. Now, to be quite honest, it's not incredibly old, I don't think. It looks like it's made out of some, I don't know, cheap zinc pop metal. Seems to be crumbling in some places, but it hasn't been in the ground long enough for the shackle to rust away to nothing. We can see right in the center, Yale. We do have a little brass disc here at the bottom, which is probably why the target sounded so good. And we have this flaky white paint, which is almost certainly lead. Lead paint. I'll make sure I won't eat it. But that's cool. I love finding padlocks. It always makes me wonder, what were they locking up, and now why is it in the ground? Being in Vermont, I say this about a lot of things. I have to wonder if they dropped it in the wintertime in a foot of snow, couldn't find it, and then come springtime it was already underground a bit. That's cool. Little Yale padlock. Let me know what you think they were locking up. 86. Coin, it looks like. No way. No way. Well, thus far today, I have dug over 100 holes, easily. And many of those have been in the upper 80s and the 90s range, which usually means it's going to be a big piece of brass or maybe possibly a coin. And many of them have been coins, but with the exception of a couple wheat cents and that mercury dime, they've all been modern within the last 50 years. Every single time I'm hoping we're gonna get something real nice and old from the beginning of this habitation in this house. Finally, we got one. So when it first popped out, I thought maybe it was a modern quarter. Not quite the right size though, and it read far too high to be a nickel. 1865 2-cent coin. A 2-cent coin. Not just an old coin, but such a cool one. 2-cent coins and 3-cent coins were not around very long. Most people have probably never even heard of them before. This one, unfortunately, has a lot of verdigris on it. Verdigris being that kind of green copper rust. You can see right here, it's kind of a crust. You can see the coin instantly drying because I have isopropyl alcohol in my spray bottle. But there you can see the number 2, United States of America. And interestingly, up at the top, you can see "In God We Trust." And this is actually the first US currency to have that, the 2-cent coin. What an awesome coin, and if I'm going to find an old coin at this place, I'm happy it was one like this. Kind of an unusual one. It's in beautiful shape too, this side at least. So awesome. Made my day. What a coin. $78. No way. Wow. What? So utensils, particularly spoons, have got to be top 5 most commonly found items, for me at least, metal detecting, at places of any age. We find them at sites from the 1700s, places where people still live today. Speculate maybe it's because kids were using them as digging toys. You know, they're out here in the yard, they break or they lose them. This one in particular though, as I had mentioned, the building was built sometime around the middle of the 1800s. This one, I can tell because of this little scalloped design where the handle met the bowl, is, if not middle of the 1800s, a little bit older than that, which is wild. I didn't expect to find anything quite this old here. Obviously the land could be way older than the building, but this is the only early 1800s, late 1700s item I have found here. The very exciting spoon bowl. Not exciting, but the idea that there could possibly be things here that are this old that maybe are exciting has me optimistic. Let's see what else we can find. Well, my camera malfunctioned. I thought it was recording, it wasn't. This target was mid 70s, low 80s, I think. Unbelievably, we have a fragment of a shoe buckle. Late 1700s, early 1800s. It's the part that we always find. This is where the pin went through. A design I've never seen before, kind of a zigzag. I guess mine's going this way. Right next to the road. Incredible. Let's see what else we can find. Well, this target is not very good. It sounds like it's very deep. Sometimes it's up in the 90s, high 80s, 90s. Lots of topsoil, that's good. No way. No way. Oh. What in the world? Flabbergasted. I just got done saying, after I found that old spoon, I did not expect to find anything here from the end of the 1700s, early 1800s, and what I just found is a copper coin. A big British copper coin. That is among the oldest I have ever found. Unbelievably, of all places. Let's see if there's a date on this thing. Now, I knew it was an old one because you can see here, there's a thick rim around the outside. It's a George coin. This is a George the First British halfpenny. Typically what we find at colonial sites, George the Second's, George the Third's, and state coins. This is a George the First, 1723. 301 years old. Flabbergasted. Never would have imagined. Now, I am right next to a road. The road historically was one of the main routes through Vermont, so there's a pretty good chance that this wasn't dropped by somebody living on the property. It's more than likely somebody traveling through. But as I had just mentioned, the land itself is old. This was more than likely sheep pasture or an agricultural field at some point in Vermont's history, European history. You know, I'm finding it next to aluminum tokens from the 1960s, wheat cents from the 1920s. It's just wild to find something so old just mixed in. Absolutely one of the oldest coins I've ever found in the United States. And it's in pretty good shape too. All right, folks, well, on that note, I'm gonna be calling it a day. I mean, what is there to say about the turn of events? When I got here this morning, I was just praying we might find a few things from the 1800s, given the history of the building. You know, I had accepted the fact that most of the things were gonna be from within the last 100 years. Never in my wildest dreams did I think we would be finding things 300 years old. But Vermont, it's an old spot. People have been living here for a long time. You never know what you're gonna find. I have everything I found here out. Let's take a look at it all. All right, well, here are the treasures at the end of the day, and at least a couple of these are just totally mind-blowing for me. Starting in the back, we have our Reins guide. I did actually find another tire valve stem cover. This one seems like it's a little bit more modern than the Model T I found last week. We have a piece of a harmonica, a gear from maybe this. I think maybe that this is more of a combination lock than it is a pocket watch, but this is certainly a clock gear. A very old spoon. I would have to guess dipping into the 1700s to go along with this shoe buckle fragment. Again, another design that I have not seen before. It seems like every time I find one, it's a unique design. We have our mystery find over here. Hopefully one of you have solved that for me by now. Yale padlock, a few buckles from horse tack or saddles, and then out front, the things I am most excited about. We have a fairly old button. I would have to say probably late 1800s on that. Shell oil token from the 1960s. A 1941, I think, mercury dime. An 1865 2-cent coin, and then an unbelievable George the First British halfpenny, 1723, 301 years old. Insane. All right, folks, well, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and hopefully I will see you next Friday for another new adventure somewhere up here in the mountains of Vermont.